All right, hello everyone. So today what I want to do is I want to start an architectural demonstration in Rhinoceros. This is going to assume that you've already watched the introduction video for Mac or PC. I'm doing this on a Mac, so some of the layout will be a little different if you're using a PC, but the commands will be the same. And I'll try my best to indicate where functions are as I'm going along. So, all right, I'm going to start a new model from a template. So I'm going to click on my templates here, and I'm going to do large object inches and open it up. So this is our display here. On the Mac version, we've got all of our tools over here. This up here should look pretty much the same on both versions. I like to actually collapse that little window there, and making sure that we have all of our snaps enabled. These snaps are the ones we're going to use, except for near. I might turn those on every once in a while. Leave the center on as well. And then up here we've got grid snap. I'm going to turn that off. But we want to make sure Smart Track and Gumball and Ortho are on. And if you have a PC, this is on the bottom, and there's a little button that says "Oh Snap." If you click on it, it brings the larger window up to be able to select these. So that's for PC people. Okay, so I'm going to start from a top view. Just double click up here, and I'm going to back out, and I can see that my grid space is not as large as I want and not in the right units for what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to go under File and go to Settings. And it might be called Preferences on the PC, but you'll get something like this. And what we want to do is make sure that our grid, click on Grid, has the right setting. So I'm going to make this 2,000 grid lines. I'm going to make a minor grid line every 12 inches and a major grid line every 5 minor grid lines, which would make it every 5 feet, because 5 times 12 is 5 feet. Okay, so now if I close this out, you can see I've got a lot more grid to work with here. So I'm going to start by drawing the footprint of the house. Now, you'll remember the line tool from our previous session, and let me just reiterate a couple of things. So line, you just type anywhere and the commands come up, enter, and then it wants to know where to start. This is where I'll turn my grid snap on so that I can snap to a grid mark, like right there. And if I click and start to draw up, you can see with ortho on, it stays at a 90-degree angle. If I turn ortho off, it starts to rotate freely. So we want to make sure ortho is on. And I'm going to start to draw my line up. And the distance I'm going here is 60 foot, so apostrophe, 4 inches. So I'm just typing that in. So let me do that again. Line, enter. Find a spot to start, right there. Draw up 60 apostrophe 4. So that's 60 foot 4 inches. And yours will of course be whatever dimension you want it to be. So it puts a little tab mark right where I'm going to be ending my line, and so I'm just going to click to get out of that. And then I'm going to draw over another line. Actually, let's use a polyline. So polyline will be just like line, except for it doesn't end after each length. It keeps going. So if I go polyline, enter my starting point. If I have my snaps enabled, I'll see my end snap here, which I do. So I click there and start to draw out. And that distance is 25 foot, or 27 foot 6. 27 foot 6. Enter. So that puts a point there. If I click close to it, or I don't even need to click, I can start to drag up here. I'm sorry. 6 foot 6. Enter. And then now I need to click because I'm changing the directions again. And then I'm going to do 23 foot 6, enter. and click and drag it down. And then I'm going to do 62 feet, enter, and click. Drag to the left here, 21 foot 8 inches, that way. Click, drag up this way, and I will do 12 foot 11, or 13 feet. Click. And then I'm just going to drag it a little bit long here. Of course, this shape will all depend on the footprint of the building you do. It might even just be a rectangle, but to make something that has a little bit more dynamic shapes, you can use this method. So now I'm going to draw a line 21 feet 8 inches from this side. So I go to my endpoint, 21 foot 8 inches, enter, click, and then hit enter again to bring up the same command, which is kind of handy, which was the line command. So now I'm going to click on this end here and go all the way to this perpendicular intersection. And we have to make sure all of our lines are touching. If you didn't go from snap to snap, nothing else is going to work. So that just means that every line has to be really touching one another. So let me trim this section out because we want to get rid of this section of the line. So I'm going to go trim, enter, and then it says select the cutting object. Basically, where do you want to trim to? And I want to trim to this line. So then I hit enter, and then I can trim out that space by clicking on this. And then enter again gets you out of the command. And if you're ever stuck, just hit escape and start typing the commands over again. So now we've got all of these lines all intersecting, but we want to join them all together as one line. You can see if I click on it, this segment here is all separate. So let's make it all one piece. I'm clicking and dragging from right to left to select everything. And then you can either type join, or if you see the puzzle piece, click the puzzle pieces. That makes it all one piece. Great. So now what we want to do is we want to make the wall thickness. So I'm going to offset this whole shape inward, and that's going to make my wall thickness. So offset, enter, click on this shape, and I want to change my distance. So I can double click over here, and it'll be a command line will be written out on top if you're using a PC, but you will be able to click on distance. It'll be the word distance without any kind of icon around it. Just click on that, and then we're going to enter 5, enter. And we're going to come inward this way, so click. And because I had everything joined together, I don't have any funky corners I got to trim out or anything like that. This is giving me my overall footprint of the wall layout for the building. So next I'm going to switch into perspective. I just want to show you guys how we would make these walls. So if I select the whole thing, going from right to left, and then type extrude curve right there, enter, as I bring it up, the walls will come up. And you can pick the height that you want this to be. I'm going to do 10 feet for my purposes, but for a museum or something more, with higher ceilings, you'll make that whatever dimension you want it to be. Okay, so now if I right click, I can turn this into a shaded view. And for PC people, right next to where it says perspective, there's a little down arrow. If you click that, you'll get that same menu here. Keep that in mind. Okay, so that's giving me my walls, but now I need a floor. So I still have the lines that I use to extrude, and I'm going to use the interior lines here and just click on that where it says curve, and you can see in yellow that line is highlighted that goes all the way around that we used to make the interior of the walls. And I'm going to use the interior wall line, not the exterior wall line, interior wall line, to make a floor. So I'm going to extrude that curve. Actually, yeah, I'm going to extrude that curve, enter, and I'm going to go down about an inch. Okay. And now you can see I have a floor in there. So you can use that to draw lines and create walls on the interior too, just making sure that you have closed off shapes entirely. And I'll go over that more in a minute, but if you wanted to skip ahead and kind of play with your layout, you could probably do that right about now. I'm also going to be going over windows and that kind of stuff. But next crucial step is actually to set up your layers. If you're exporting this to another program where you might want to add materials in a different program, you can do that by layer, and the layers will transfer out of Rhino into whatever program you're using, even if it's a program like the Unreal Engine for video game design. So layers are super important. If I click up here on this little tab here on my Mac, I get this panel over here, which I've collapsed earlier in order to just get it out of the way. But down here we see the different layers that are just here by default. We want to make sure that everything is on a different layer, and that includes windows, glass panes, framing, frames for the windows, trim for the building. They all need to have separate layers, and the reason for that is it's easier to organize and add materials later. So you have to think about it as every layer needs its own material. So let's go ahead and change some layers. So I'm going to change the name of this from layer 1. I'm going to call it exterior walls. This layer 2 here, I'm going to change this to floor. I'm going to create a couple of them that I haven't drawn yet. I'm going to create one called windows, or not windows, glass. Frames, that's frames for the windows. One called trim. Add a couple more and call this one curves. And that's where we'll keep all our 2D lines. And doors. And then one more we'll call ceiling. Okay, now we want to put a few things on the layers, so I'm going to first put the floor on the floor layer. So I click it, go over to floor, click on that, right click, and move objects to this layer. And then I'm going to click on the walls here, and click exterior walls, right click, and go move object to this layer. And you notice that, of course, the colors are changing. Now I'm going to hide those so I can just see the curves that I used to draw this thing, and shift click to add to the selection, click on my light bulb, and that hides everything. So now I've got these curves or lines, Rhino just calls them curves, and I'm going to right click and move objects to this layer. Okay, so we have walls and a floor now. We want to add more details like windows and doors to this. So we actually need to cut out from our floor plan the locations of all the windows and doors. So I'm going to do that from a top view. And I'm going to make these polylines individual lines by exploding. So let me click and drag to select those and then explode. So that now makes every curve its own individual piece. All right, so let's actually want to move this onto the grid here. Let me do that real quick. So Command All to grab that, and then a move, type move, enter, grab this end intersection, and move it to there, enter again, click, move it to there. So that's just keeping things organized. Okay, so I'm going to do a garage door in the front, 3 windows here, slider over here, a slider back here, slider over here. So this is, going to be an architectural plan, but these windows and stuff can be appropriated for whatever plan you're trying to do. This technique can just be based on your own individual design. So let me go ahead. I'm going to start actually with the garage door because it's an easy one. So I'm going to do a line in the middle here. So I'm looking for my midpoint. It says midpoint there. And make sure it says perpendicular. And then I'm going to offset this each direction 8 feet because my garage door opening is going to be 16 feet. So offset. And I'm going to do 8 apostrophe for distance. And then I'm going to click on this line and go this way, click on it again, enter brings up the same command, and go this way. Then I'm going to delete this. I don't need it anymore. And also pay attention to how I delete it. If I were to go from right to left, I select all of the lines that it touches. But if I go from left to right, even top left to right, it only selects the line that it completely surrounds. That makes it really easy to select things that are inside other things. Okay, so the next tool I'm going to use is I'm going to trim the space between these. So bring up the trim command, TR for trim, enter, select this, shift, and select that, enter. Now those are the cutting lines, what I'm cutting off to. And then if I click on this section here and here, it gives me that open section that I want. So I hit enter one more time, gets me out of the command. Okay, so now I'm going to put a front door in. Go from midpoint to midpoint here. And my front door is actually going to be 3 feet wide. So I'm going to offset 18 inches either way. So this way and that way. And then trim that out. And I can go from left to right and grab these two at the same time. Enter, click, click. So you can see you can get quicker and quicker with this stuff. All right, so I'm going to come around here. I'm going to cut out more windows, and I'm going to draw in some more lines that are indicative of the interior walls. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that, and then we'll come back in a minute. All right, so I've been busy. I've added a lot of interior walls and all of my windows and door openings around the entire house. And for the interior walls, all I did was offset inward from the exterior walls to create the line, and then offset again 5 inches. So for example, if I offset a distance of whatever this is, 263 inches, enter. So now if I go offset 263 inches, that way it draws a line there. Then I can offset that line 5 inches, and it draws a line 5 inches over. See, so then I just trim things out the same way we did with the other window. All right, so next step is to take all of the interiors and make them on a different layer. So I want to make sure that each one of these walls is independent. So I'm going to draw a line to separate them from the exterior. So I'm just drawing lines from here to here. And you'll see, let me go to a top view here. You'll see that I've done that in every area where they separate. So you want to have that be a rectangle. You don't want it to be trimmed off in there. Okay. Even this little line right there, separating the outside from the inside. So now when I select that shape, I also want it to be separate. So we want to make sure that all of our interior walls are closed rectangles. I'm going to turn off my gumball. The gumball, of course, is this thing here. So I'm going to turn that off just so you can see better. So I'm going to try to select all of my exterior walls or interior walls by themselves and leave the exterior walls alone. And I'm using my left to right select tool. And I'm also going through and double checking to make sure that they're all islands at the same time. So I don't want this selection, so I'm going to command click to deselect it. You can see that it's completely circled in yellow. We're good there. Command click. Okay, let's add a layer. Call it int walls. And then I'm going to move objects to this layer. So move objects to the layer. Okay. And I'm going to change the color of this layer to lighter gray. No, let me change it again. That's not different enough. How about blue for now? Okay. So as I change the layers, I'll change the colors, which will make it easy for me to remember that what I've done. Then I can see this line right here now. See how that overlap is happening? That's really bad, because if that happens when we try to extrude the walls, it's not going to work. So let me first go ahead and put this on this layer. And then I'm going to click on this line here. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete it. I'm going to click on this little spot right here. That means that I'm going to start drawing on my interior walls layer just to keep it all in line. So now I'm going to do another line just to connect this to that. And then I also want to make sure that is on my interior walls. So there we go. I'm just moving all the objects to the layer. Okay, I need to do a line right. Do a line right there. Okay. Trim this to this point. Because that's going to be an interior wall. And to add to the selection, remember I'm clicking Shift. And I do need to, let me just delete that. Draw another line from here to there. Oops, missed it again. So let's trim. Click this for cutting blade, enter. Click that to cut off. Enter to get out of the command. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the curves just so I can look at these shapes. See that I'm missing a line there. Here I'm missing one as well. Okay, looks good. So now I want to extrude all those up to make them the interior walls that they're meant to be. So let's select all of that and then join it together. So everything should be all one piece that can be. And let's go back to perspective here. And I'm going to select everything and extrude it upward 10 feet. Enter. And just kind of inspecting them to make sure they all have tops. If they don't have a top, then you had an overlapping line somewhere. You got to undo and check all of your line work again. If things aren't touching perfectly, it won't do what mine did, which is extrude up well. For some reason, I'm seeing some stray lines and stuff in here. I'm going to go ahead and undo and check these kind of odd sections here. Should have 3 points on each one of them. This one here is kind of a funky line, so I'm going to go ahead and explode it. And I'm going to look at this line by deleting it, and I'm going to draw another one. And if you don't care about those funky things, that's okay, but I try to keep everything as clean as possible. The cleaner your geometry is, the better it's going to export, the better you're going to be able to play with the model. So if you're kind of haphazard about things, it might catch up with you in the long run. You might get away with it, but it's always better to err on the side of caution. Okay, so I'm going to select everything, join it together. I think it looks good. Okay, so I'm going to grab everything again, join it all back together, see what happens if I try to extrude the curve. I'm still getting the warning. I'm over it this time. I'm just going to do 10 foot, enter. And let's turn on our exterior walls just to make sure there's no overlap. So right click on the light bulb, brings it back. There is a little overlap right there. Right there. Oh, you know what? I have two of them for some reason. Okay. So I just deleted that other one, but it looks like everything is, oh, 2 floors. Ooh, my zoom is all over the place. So now I'm going to use zoom as a tool. Alt, enter, enter, and that kind of reconfigures everything. So if everything looks like it's pretty well lined up, nothing is overlapping much, I can move on to my next. So let me turn off those layers so that I can work on my curves a little bit and put them all on the same layer, and then we'll make windows. Okay, so now I'm going to put everything, even the interior walls, on the curves layer, on the interior wall curves. Let's see here. Turn that back on, and I'm going to hide the. Let's go to a front view here. Little trick: go from left to right, select all of that, go back into perspective, and now everything is selected, all the curves, and move it to the curve line. So. Curves, move objects to this layer. Okay, so now when I hide the interior walls, it leaves my interior wall curves. Back to a top view. Now I'm going to actually start building the windows and making the cutouts, and then we'll move on to materials and put a roof on it. Okay. And I just realized I haven't saved. Make sure you save. So let's go ahead and file. Save ... And this will also start autosaves too, which you definitely want in case something crashes. So I'm going to call this house 1, put it on my desktop. Okay, now let's go ahead and get started with the windows. With the windows, I'm going to go ahead and click on, or create a layer and call it windows. I'm going to move things off of this layer eventually, but just for ease right now, do that and then make it active. For the window, I'm going to draw a rectangle in the opening. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch into perspective. I'm going to extrude this rectangle the height of the window. So my window is going to be 4 feet off the ground. And then I'm going to copy both of these, COPY for copy, enter, click the base point to grab it from, and click on the base point to move it to. enter. And for every window that's the same height, you can move, and same size, you can move these and copy them around. It's easier to redraw when you change directions, but you can do as many as you want. Okay, now I'm going to bring back up my exterior walls, and I'm going to move these shapes upward. So my window sizes are actually 4 feet by 3 feet. So I made these the wrong size. So let's just go ahead here and copy these rectangles up. So I'm just going from left to right, shift clicking to get them all on, and then move from here to there. So make sure you grab the right snap point, otherwise this won't work. And then I still got them selected, so I can extrude curve the height, which will be 36 inches or 3 feet. Okay. And now I'm going to subtract out the openings here. So I don't need this extrusion or this extrusion, so I can delete those two. Now I'm going to use Boolean difference. You can either type Boolean difference or find this command, and Boolean spelled for you right there. Click on that, and then we click on what we want to keep, which are the walls, enter, and what we want to get rid of are the openings. So that gives us two openings. And this blue color, I think that happened because of the layer we've got turned on. So actually, I don't know why those are there, but either way, they can go. So I'll just left to right. Always keeping things clean. Okay, so next step is to create our windows, the frames, and then the glass. So I'm going to actually just select these rectangles here and command click or control click to get rid of that one. And then I want to isolate it, so I can either click on this and hold it down and go to isolate objects, or click on the center mouse on the Mac and it's right there. But these are at the right height and everything, so I'm going to actually go to a top view and start drawing the shape of the glass. So these are going to be sliders, so there's going to be two pieces of glass inside of frames that are offset from one another. So let's go ahead and draw the frame first. So I'm going to draw a rectangle from here to there. Hold on a second. Let's do this a different way. Just draw a line down the middle and offset that line 1/2 inch, 0.5 on both sides. Okay, so that's 1 inch for the frame. I'm going to draw a line in the middle of this from here to here for the two panes. And then I'm actually just going to trim to this point these lines. So I've got one single frame going from wall to wall, or from midpoint to the wall here. And then I'm going to close this off so that I've got a complete rectangle. And then switch to perspective, check to see it's on that level. It is, good. Then I'm going to go up 36 inches. Okay. Then I'm going to go to a left view. So I've got a right view here, which is not what I want. Left view. If you have a PC, click on the down arrow. If not Mac, right click and go to set view and go to left. And it changes what's written there to a left view. And the reason for that is so that I can draw right on this surface. The views you're in determine the direction of, like, for example, a rectangle that I draw. So I'm going to draw a rectangle here to there, and then I'm going to offset enter. In 1 inch, 1, enter. This rectangle, curve, inward. Okay? And then if I go back to perspective here, I can select this rectangle by clicking on it, and then extrude that back through the object, and then Boolean difference it to create a frame. Boolean difference, click on what you want to keep, enter, what you want to remove, enter. And make sure that your Boolean is lined up right. If it's not, it didn't work. If it doesn't work, then click on it, make sure your gumball's on, and then move the object through it so that you can see that it's going all the way through. So now when I Boolean difference, it should definitely work even though it did before. Cool, so that's our frame. Now my zoom is a little wonky again, so I'm going to go zoom, enter, A, enter, E, enter. And now it's oriented my zoom around these two windows because that's the only two things I've got on right now. So next step, I'm going to draw a line down the middle here, from midpoint to midpoint. Find that midpoint, perpendicular. There, finally. Extrude the curve upward. Parent intersection's good. And then extrude that curve, or the surface this time, extrude surface. Click the surface, enter. And now we're going to make it 1/4 of an inch, 0.25, enter. So that gives us a frame with glass inside of it. So next step is to offset and copy those over so that they look like they're sliding by each other. So if I click this, these two here, and go copy from a base point, I'm going to grab it right there at the end, and I'm going to move it to the other end, and then enter to get out. Now I'm going to move these two objects 1/2 inch forward, and these two objects 1/2 inch back. So move, click anywhere, as long as you have ortho on, and move this direction 0.5, enter, click, and then move this one, this direct, move this polysurface, and this polysurface, enter, click, and start to drag that way, with ortho on, 0.5, enter. Alright, so it looks like I did all that right. Now let's go ahead and turn the exterior walls back on. So we've got 2 glass panels and a frame here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to group them together so that it's easy for me to move them around to other locations. So if I first, let me move the curves. So hiding things. And then all of these curves I used, I can move to the curves layer. And then I'm going to hide them. And then I'm going to right click and go show selected objects and just show those objects there. Now I can group them together and I don't have any weird curves. So group, you just type. And then to ungroup them, you type ungroup. So I have those 2 windows, and now I can copy them from this base point to that base point, enter. And that's how to do windows. If you want to do sliding glass doors or something like that, which I'm going to do, but probably not go through all of the details because it's the same. You just do thicker frames for them. So sliding glass door might have a 3 or 4 inch frame around it instead of a 1 inch frame. So just play with the sizes. You can always Google technical details for mill guard sliding glass doors, and they'll come up and show you, kind of the sizes of everything. So you can do what you want with customizing things. Okay, so I'm going to do that for a little while, and then I'll come back. Actually, you know what? This is a good place probably to just show you how to make the roof. Okay, so let me just do that real quick. So with the roof, I want to use the exterior walls. So let me go ahead and hide this and trace out the whole exterior again. So I'm going to do a polyline and just trace out. I'm glad that it's in red. That makes it easy to see, even if it's not the right layer for this. You can change it later. And typically with roof lines, you have a 2-foot offset. But I'm just going to do the ceiling inside the building. So I did a polyline all the way around. I'm going to extrude that curve upward 5 inches. And then I'm going to move it up, clicking on that, 10 foot, enter. Oops. Let me hide this. Move this up, 10 foot, enter. Okay. Now let's turn on the exterior walls. So right click, show selected objects, show that object, enter. Okay. Let me turn off the curves layer. Turn on the floor layer. Let's right click, show selected. Flooring, sorry. Okay. So now if I go inside the building here, you can see that we have an interior. So that's basically how you make an architectural room. I'm still going to do the interior walls and stuff, but next I want to show you guys how to do materials and stuff. So let's do that for the next one. All right, so let's do some materials. So I can just type materials. And it'll bring up my materials panel over here, or it looks like this little, it looks like a paint tube. So if you click on that, you're in the materials section. And by default, we have no materials, so I want to add to it. So if I click on plus, I can go import material from a library, or I've got these basic ones here. So first I'm just going to start with some basics like glass. So if I click on glass, I get subcategories here that say what color is the glass. You can make it more blue or change that, how much reflectivity it has, how much frost it has. So if this is a bathroom or something like that, you might want to increase the amount of frost, that kind of thing. So if I right click on the glass material here, I can assign to layers of objects. So that's going to be the best way to do it. But first I got to make sure that I'm on the right layers. So let's bring up the layers window. So if I click right here, I'm back to layers. So I want to make this object have layers of glass. So I'm going to ungroup them. And then select the glass panel, shift click, shift click, shift click. Move objects to this layer. Switch back to my materials. Right click and assign to layers of objects. Assign to layers. And then this comes up, and assign it to glass. Apply. Now if I switch out of this mode into rendered, which if you have a PC, it's the down arrow, you can see through the glass now. Great. So we've got glass. Let's add some more materials. So let's add a metal for the aluminum frames. I'm going to change the color here. Double click. I'm going to do like a really dark black. Okay. And the polish I think is good. So next we want to grab our frames. Shift clicking. Poly surfaces. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my layers here and go to frames and apply or move objects to the layer. Back to materials and right click this, assign to layers. And I'm going to assign that to frames. Apply. Okay, and then if the interior walls were all the same color, great. The only problem you might have is the exterior walls are going to be a different color than the interior walls, so you will want to add a thickness to the interior walls that will allow you to add a material to it. But for this case, I'm actually just going to add the whole material to one object. So I'm going to make the interior walls a paint, and white is fine. How matte, how glossy, it's all right there. And I'm going to assign that to a layer. And that layer is going to be the exterior walls. Okay. So now let's do the floor. So start with a new material, and then, import material from library. There we go. And here under render content, if you're having problems finding this, Google it. It should come up though. So if I go under architectural here, I can do flooring, wood, or ceramics, or you can do something like even under the wall here, you can find concrete, which might be kind of cool depending on your application. So I'm going to do wood floor though. So let's do wood. And I'm going to do floorboards. Floor, wood. No, floorboards, reflective. Let's do that one. Then open. Then we'll go back here and assign it to flooring. Apply. Okay, so the next thing to do is to notice that the sizes are all messed up. So we can come into here and we can look at what's called tiling, right? So okay, so to do the tiling, to change the size of this, you actually come down to textures, and then you click on the actual image source for it. So I'm going to change this to 100 by 100, and that increases the size. And if I want to rotate this, I can do that here too, so I can change it to 90, tab. And you'll see that there's a little funkiness to it. But that can be fixed. I'll show you how. So the funkiness has to do with what's called a bump map. So I click on this again, it brings it back to where it was. Right here it shows bump. And what that is it gives it texture. So I need to change these to match the other ones and put it in a 90-degree angle. And now it all lines up. And there you go. So that gives you your floorboards. You can change the glossiness, the reflectivity of things, how frosty the windows are, all of that kind of stuff through the materials window over here. Now the last step I want to show you is rendering and lighting. So rendering is this right here. You can just type render. If I click on it, it'll start to process the ray tracing of the environment. What ray tracing means is basically where light hits, it records, and where light doesn't hit, it doesn't record. So I don't have any lighting inside the room here, so as this renders out, we'll have to adjust the lighting accordingly. So I'm gonna pause here and let it run for a second while it finishes rendering. So I'm actually going to go ahead and stop this rendering. You can see the frame is really large here, so I can drag it in, make it all fit. My size settings are pretty large. So I'm going to click the hand here and stop it. You can see that it's super dark, and that's basically all I wanted to show you. You don't want to stop rendering midway very often because you could crash, and it's always a good idea to save, command save, to before you start rendering. So okay, let's do this again. This time instead I'm going to do a render preview after I add some lights. So render preview won't be the full resolution, but it gives you an idea of your lighting. So I'm going to type command point light, enter, and that brings up this little glyph, is what it's called. And I'm going to actually just set it on this end intersection here so that I know that it's up in the sky. And it's kind of in the wall, so it's not giving you the light you want. So I'm going to go to a top view here now and find that light glyph. There it is. And I'm going to move it over here, and then I'm going to actually copy it a couple of times. That's probably good for now. But you can also, when you have the lights selected, go to your properties. Where is properties? There, or your light properties, I'm sorry, right here. Click on that, and then you can lower or raise the intensity factor to bring up the intensity of the light. So I'll switch back over to perspective with both of them selected, and now I'm going to push them down into the room. You can see the light casting out of the room. Now I'm going to go back into the room, and what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to create a view so that I can come back to this view without having to zoom in and out. So if I go under view here and go to named views under set view here and go plus, it'll automatically create a view based on our current one, and I'll call this window or whatever I want to call it. You can call it main room, whatever, and that's the view. So I can always return to that view later by just having the camera here, and if I double click on it, it goes back to it. Kind of nice. If I go top, double click, goes back to it, it's in wireframe. Let me get rid of this though. So right click, and then I can go to set view, back to top view. Okay, back to my window view. Cool. So now let's try doing a render preview. So go over here and go to render preview, and it'll give me a sample of what I'm going to be looking at. Okay, so there's my little render preview. The lights look a little bit blown out, so I might change the intensity of them. So you basically do render previews to find what's working for you. So if I click here, change my intensity factor down on that light, down on that light, it'll give me a little bit better overall lighting. So play with that. Shadow intensity also, if you want to soften your shadows, which is always advisable, you can do that too when you have other things in the room. You can name your lights. Turn on my sun. Okay, so those are the lights. Next step, I'm going to turn on my other layers that are missing and add materials to that. So turn on my interior walls. And then also assign the wall paint material to it. So click there, go back to my paint, right click, assign to layers, and I'm going to do interior walls, apply. There we go. And then the next thing I want to do, actually, the last thing I'm going to do is show you guys there are different types of cameras you can add in here as well. And if you change your camera, adjust the lens length here and zoom out a little bit, it gives you a wider angle lens. So I just click and drag a little bit. And so for interiors, this gives you the ability to see a lot more of the inside of the room. So the last step is to change the rendering settings. I've already got my rendering settings pumped up pretty high, but you don't by default. So I'm going to click on this tab here, where there are other places to find it, like under render, go to render properties there, and that'll actually bring up the window. So I'm going to go through this because it is the same as it is on the PC. So I'm going to use Rhino render, current viewport. You can also set that to cameras too, to a named viewport. Viewport dimensions, I've got that pretty high. I mean, you could do it 1080p or whatever resolution you want for your purposes. DPI, you could bump that up to 300. And then after you change that to 300, you can lower that resolution back down because it'll automatically raise it up. Quality, final quality. This is your final rendering settings. You don't want to use this for preview. For preview, I would definitely use low quality and then put this at like 800 by 600, something small. Background color, I can change to a gradient if I wanted to. I could do top color, kind of like a cayenne with a gray bottom. This is kind of a little too intense, so if I go to my color picker here, I can lower the intensity of it. And you can see out the window how what it's doing. So find a color that works for you if you want to do that. Or 360-degree environment, you can do this and then set it to no environment. I've got the ground plane turned on. No environment here. Sun settings, you can change the time of day. So if you want sunshine coming into your windows, that kind of thing, you can do that here. You can set the geolocation and everything in here too. So I can move the map around. Or you can find out your latitude and longitude just by Googling it and getting it on the Google map. And setting my time of day, I'm going to set it for 10 a.m. just because I'd like a little bit of angles. Los Angeles, California. Apply. Okay. So that gives me all of my settings here that I'm going to use for my final rendering. And then if you just click on this or type render, it'll give you the full version of it. But remember, of course, it's going to take maybe up to an hour to render. So keep that in mind. All right. Thank you very much.